Every woman has a story, a journey to discovering who she is and finding her truth in the world. This is where women come together to find connection through sharing those stories. Welcome to the story of her. What's your story? Welcome, Jenna Heath, to the Story of Her podcast. So I want to start with you telling us a little bit about your story right now. At this little snippet in time, who is Jenna Heath? How do you define yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I currently, in this given moment, I am sitting in my home office with my puppy. I'm kidding. I don't
Oh,
think that's exactly what you meant, but
that is perfect.
so I live in Las Vegas. I've been here for about 10 years, and I actually work and teach at the university here. So my classes surround career and leadership development, which is really kind of what I spend most of my time doing. So whether I'm teaching my classes, running programming, I do coaching and consulting all around leadership development. And really my goal is to kind of help people identify what success looks like for them. I love working in academia and being an educator, but I am very self-aware that not everyone can afford that avenue. And so I actually launched my podcast, Tearing Up My Heart, last year. And my goal really was to make leadership development a little bit more accessible to folks that maybe couldn't afford a traditional pathway to education. And I've honestly loved it. So I've really just in this season of my life, I've kind of jumped into really helping people in that area. And when I'm not doing that, I really am spending all my time with my new puppy. I have a 10-month-old Italian Greyhound, and
Oh, wow.
he is just like the light of my life. He is the funnest little guy. And my husband and I have a lot of fun adventures coming up to travel with him. And he's going on his first plane ride this summer. So I'm definitely living in my fur mom era for sure.
Love it. I love it. I want to dive in a little bit to that concept of success, because I think that is initially what drew me to your content, because I talk a lot. I actually went and spoke at a conference about kind of mental health in the industry that I work in, and how you can't define your success by anybody else's measuring stick, because when you do, you're always going to fail. Everybody's success looks different. I'm curious what, in your experience, led you to that revelation yourself.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It really was my lived experience. And I think that that's true for so many people, right? Like whatever we end up doing in our life really is because something happened in our life that made us curious about something or frustrated about something. And that really was my experience. Yeah, I was in college and I was going down a really traditional path. And my dad had kind of always told me my entire life I should be a lawyer because I love talking to people and I love arguing with people, which I've come to find out. I think a lot of parents say that to their overly independent daughters usually. Yeah, I don't think he was being malicious at all. I think he was just doing the best with what the information he had. But once I went down that pathway, I realized that just wasn't really a great path for me. And I honestly made it pretty far down the path. Like I finished my bachelor's, I had applied to law school, I had gotten into law school, I was about to start law school. And I literally decided a couple weeks before I was going to go that this probably isn't the right fit for me. And so I ended up just kind of meandering after I graduated undergrad and really doing a whole bunch of different jobs and a lot of different areas. And I really ended up getting so frustrated by so many of them. I had so many really, really crappy leaders early on in my career that were just honestly horrible people, but also really bad managers. And I actually wouldn't even affiliate them with the word leader.
Wow.
And so after kind of going through that, I kind of got thrown into a career in higher education, but I ended up loving it. And I also got thrown into being a career coach, what I also ended up really loving, and I was really good at it. So I became a certified career coach, and I just kind of started going down that rabbit hole. And what I realized is the thing that I enjoyed the most was not necessarily showing people this is your yellow brick road and this is what you should go down, but helping them think for themselves, helping them understand how to critically think about situations and their own life, helping them create their own values, their mission statement, really understanding who are you as a professional and how does your career interact with your real life and what should that look like for you? And almost every single time for me personally, that ended up helping people think about success from their own lens, not what the world tells us is successful. And that has certainly also been true in my own life. I don't think if you had told me 10 years ago, this is what I would be doing right now, I'd be like, yeah, okay, you're crazy. That is not what I'm going to be doing. But I love it. And I've really found kind of my groove in a way that I enjoy, that brings me fulfillment, and also, fills my paycheck. So that makes me happy. And I think that's really been it. So it was like my lived experience, and just really trying to help people understand that their lived experience is unique and valuable, and that's okay. Like, they don't need to do what everyone else is doing or saying. They just have to figure out their own path. And maybe sometimes they need some help in doing that. And that's what people like me are here for.
Exactly. I think sometimes they need some help figuring it out because, especially as the mother of two college age students, right? They're both
More
in
power to you,
college,
girlfriend.
right? Like one of them has a very specific career path. He's an electrical engineering major. Like that is a pretty specific dynamic, and he loves it. And then the other, it loves art, and he wants to find a way to make a career with art. So many people are just like, well, that's a wasted college degree, like, or, oh, you're just, ugh, it's so frustrating. In fact, when he was about 15, he really wanted to be a graphic designer. And he said to people, they would say, what do you want to do when you grow up? Or what's your plan? People always ask teenagers that, like they have any clue.
Come on, like they don't even know. Like you don't
Right.
even know when you're asking that question, let alone
Right.
the teenager. Like why do we put that pressure on people?
Exactly. And so they all come up with something that they say, but, he would tell people he wanted to be a graphic designer. And inevitably, they would say, ooh, that's a really competitive field. Like that was the words that came out of so many people's mouths. Like in the way they said it wasn't, ooh, that's a really competitive field. That's really cool that you want to take that on and that's your challenge. It was like, ooh, are you good enough for that? Like, are you willing to deal with that? And I feel like so many times teenagers especially are constantly told what they can't do or what's too hard. So it's beautiful that you're taking them as young adults and helping them kind of figure it out, but you're not limiting yourself to that. Like it's not
Yeah.
just young adults that you help. It's a little bit of everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've had the honor of working with, all the way from an entry level professional, what I would call, young adults, 17, 18, all the way up to C-suite executives. And they're certainly so wildly different. But I think it really all goes back to, like, I'm not a mental health practitioner and I'm not a therapist or anything, but I do see so many trend lines that, I am by practice a researcher. That's what I've been trained to be. And so I love to look at data and understand trends and why are certain things happening to certain populations of people. And I think that's the one thing I've found is regardless who I'm working with, it could be an 18-year-old or a 60-year-old for all I care. They're all dealing with similar struggles of exactly what you just outlined, that someone said something to them that really embedded into their brain and they have had a hard time separating from, or they have trained their brain for so long to do and be a certain way that they can't separate from that. I see this a lot of times for my clients that are what I would call career pivoting. Maybe they've been in an industry for 10, 15 years and they're like, I don't want to do this anymore and I want to try something new. And they just feel so like torn up about it because they're like, this is who I am as a person. Like I am a doctor or I am a professor. And I'm like, no, like that's what you do for work. That's how you earn money. Like, and yes, of course, like I think it's everyone's goal to do something that you're passionate about, that you love, that you wake up every day really feeling like this is a purpose for you. Like, of course, everyone wants that. But is everyone that lucky? Honestly, no. and that's okay too. I think you just have to learn, like, where do you fall in that and figure out what is the most honest and authentic way for you to live that is going to keep you happy. And I think that's really where success comes from, is happiness.
Right. And measuring how you find that happiness, like
Exactly.
in the industry that I work in as a professional voice actor, there's a lot of flux in the industry right now. And people are having to leave. People are having to get full-time jobs. That they're measuring success very differently in their career. And for me, I'm happy if I can help support my kids in college. Like if I have enough money to help them get through college without having to take out a ton of student loans, I'm successful. That's it. It's nothing else. I have that luxury, though, of being able to measure success that way because I don't have to provide for my family because I have a breadwinner that we lived on a single income for 15 years. Like we already know how to do that. We got that down. So I measure success that way. But then someone else is like, no, I need to make all this money to feel successful, even though they don't actually need the money. How do you help people balance those needs and wants?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I always start with everyone pretty much in the same place, that identifying what your values are. And I think most people have never done this exercise. And I really encourage everyone to start here. There's some great tools on Brene Brown's website that I
Hmm.
love, that I really encourage people to use. And it really is starting with like, what do you care about? What are your non-negotiables of life? And let's start from there. That usually gives me honestly a really good like eye-opening experience into who someone is. And I'm like really forcefully honest with people that like, if money is one of your non-negotiables, amazing. Great.
Yeah.
I love that for you. Let's identify what that looks like. Does that, and if it's luxury finance, that's great too. But that's something you need to know, right? Like if your goal in life is to live like luxuriously financially stable, then you cannot be a teacher. That is not going to work for you unless you have some epic side hustle, which is also possible, right? But that just means you're going to have to put in a ton of effort and time into that other thing. And you're not going to be able to travel as much or have 8 children or whatever your other non-negotiables of life are. So we always start there. I think from there, I always help people kind of peel apart what are your other non-negotiables, kind of your soft non-negotiables, I tell people. So for some people that might be like a really good boss. Like they're like, I've had really crappy bosses and I don't want to live that way. And I'm like, excellent. What does a good boss look like to you? Like help me define that a little bit. For a lot of people right now, it's environment, right? So like
Yeah.
a lot of people think they want remote work, but then when they actually work somewhere that's remote, they're like, oh, I hate this. Like I need community. I need to be with people. And I'm like, great, let's add that in now, because I think that everyone loves the idea of a remote job that you don't actually have to do work. Like
Yeah.
everyone wants a non-job remote job. But when you actually get into a remote job, they're like, oh wow, I'm like tied to my office desk for 10 hours a day and my boss doesn't understand boundaries. And I'm like, yeah, that's closer to what most remote jobs look like.
Right.
And so I think kind of just helping them pull apart like their values, their non-negotiables, and then really starting to help them think about what their goal setting is. I think that most people after high school or college, they just stop thinking about their goals. I think it's a mix of shame and embarrassment and vulnerability that people are just unwilling to go down. I think for a lot of people, it means change, and people are pretty resistant to change unless you were raised in a really specific way. And so I really helping them think like, okay, what does 1 year, 3 year, 5 years down the road look like for you? And how do we create tangible action steps to get there? I'm a very action oriented human. So like feelings are not my favorite thing, which is ironic. That's actually one of the reasons I started my podcast. It's because I wanted to understand emotions more. And so I really try to help people think about like, this might be how we're feeling, and that's all valid and true. But what are the action oriented steps we need to take so you can actually reach this life of success you say you want?
Something that you said back there in the conversation really stood out to me. And it's really is about your lived experience helping you to figure out those things that are your non-negotiables. Because you're 17, you don't know what your non-negotiables, all of them are yet, because you haven't experienced the things that you're going to hate, right? And you're going to have that bad encounter with a boss and be like, I have to get out of this. Like I got to switch. This job is not working for me. Or I'll use my son as an example. He worked at a gas station in college, a Maverick. They had him making burritos. And so he was going like this and doing like a rolling motion with his hands. And he got really bad joint pain in his wrists as a result. There's no way he could have known that would happen until he encountered it. And he had to be able to say, this job doesn't work for me physically. And now he knows he's not going to work in food service likely, especially not with burritos. But so many times, and I'm wondering how you combat this, so many times teenagers and young adults and even grown up long time old people like me feel like if we try something and it doesn't work out, it's just a failure. Instead of it's an opportunity to learn what doesn't work for us and what does work for us. And I think that's a cultural thing, a societal thing that goes all the way back to like maybe the 1950s, where you got a job and you did that job until you retired and you got a retirement, and then we don't do that anymore. That's pretty rare.
Absolutely. Yeah, spot on. I mean, my brain just went in like 8 different directions when you said that. So yeah, I mean, yes, what you just said is very true, is that so much of our work culture is based off of generational history of work, right?
Right.
And I think that's a massive issue we're having right now, specifically, is that we have more generations in the workforce than we've ever had before, and they're all dramatically different. And so that is really difficult to piece apart for people in terms of when you have like a Gen Xer as a boss who's like really anti-remote work, not because they're actually anti-remote work, just because that's not their experiences. They don't
Right.
understand how to do it. And so I think so much of this goes back to like, there's just a real lack of training in terms of keeping people up to date on what is going to work for everyone. But I mean, especially as you're onboarding new, younger professionals, like we have to meet them where they're at. We really do. And so I think that that is honestly a failure on the older generation sometimes, that we are unable to change or we don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it really difficult for us to work with younger generations. But I think a huge piece of that, especially for the older generations, is we were very much so taught that failure is what that word defines as, that it's like your entire existence and life and being is falling apart. And people always fall into the shame spiral of failure, that like nothing, they're not good enough and they can't do anything and it's just they're bad, when in reality, like it's a true teacher moment for me. But I always tell people, right, like failure is defined as your first attempt in learning.
Oh, I love
And
that.
I think every teacher under the sun knows that phrase and uses it with like kiddos a lot, but I love using that phrase with college students, especially. I work with a lot of high ability college students, and failure is literally feels like the end of the world for them because they have not failed at anything in life. And I was just talking to one of my students recently, and she quite literally has never failed. Like she's an excellent student and blasted through her undergrad, blasted through her master's, and now is just going into the working world and is really struggling to find a job. Not because she's not amazing, just because she's really never had to have that experience yet. And it was like tearing her apart, like borderline, like some real mental health problems coming out of this. And I was like, hey, like this is okay. Like this is good. You're trying, you're putting yourself out there. So that's what I always go back to with people, is that failure is the first attempt in learning. So like just start to honor that you're learning, you're trying something new. And I also always remind people, like, redefine what success looked like. Exactly what you said. So success is not getting the job or getting the promotion or getting the raise. Success is I put my application in the hat. Success is I reached out to someone on LinkedIn. I mean, honestly, for some young people, success is like I looked someone in the eye for 3 seconds and I didn't run away. And that's great. Like it really is. So you have to start where you are and just recognize that failure is like that starting place. You're going to hiccup, you're going to fall over, it's not going to go well. It's just not. Like I think about this precious little puppy sitting behind me right now. And so if you've ever seen a picture of an Italian Greyhound, they're basically like drunk baby giraffes when they're little. Like their legs are so long and their body is just awkward. And so they literally like fall all over the place, but they're just like a Greyhound. They run so fast. And so they have no understanding of like what their legs are doing. And they're like running all over the place. They fall into everything. And I'm like, that's kind of how humans are. Like when we're trying something new, we're running all over the place. We're falling all over. We're excited. We're happy. And like, that is such a blessing within itself. So when we can help our brain understand, like, when you're running towards something you're excited about, you're trying something new, like you're going to fall, you're going to trip, but you're smiling, you're excited. This is fun. Like that is where success can like really link arms with you and you can enjoy the ride of that process instead of getting so stuck on like, I suck.
Yeah, exactly. And I really think a lot of it comes from the don't quit culture, especially for teenagers. You don't quit. You're not a quitter. Nobody's a quitter. I'm like, no, be a quitter. I tell my kids, I'm like, be a quitter. If something is not working for you, I fully support you in trying something new. As long as you've seen it through and you've made an effort, you win. You're not a quitter. But there's so much of that culture, you get to young adult age or at any point actually in life when you've been told, don't quit, don't quit, don't quit. So if you do quit, then you feel like a failure and you feel like you're the loser. When instead it should just be, I'm figuring it out. I'm deciding what's next. And you can do that over and over again.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the things I learned when I was researching emotions heavily for my podcast and thinking about that most people attach their emotion to who they are. So instead of saying, I am feeling angry, they say, I am an angry person. And I'm like, well, that's probably not true. You're not angry all the time. You might be feeling angry in this moment for sure. Like if someone backed into my car, yeah, I am feeling very angry in that moment. But that doesn't mean I'm an angry person. That doesn't mean I wake up every morning being like, screw this place, the world's on fire, everything sucks. Like I feel that way some days, but
Yeah.
it's a feeling, right? And so I think that's the same thing with quitting, is that like you have to start to separate that feeling that when you are quitting something, you feel uncomfortable. You feel like you're making a hard choice. You feel like you are separating from something you once cared about. So those
Mm-hmm.
are all feelings that are valid, but it doesn't make quitting bad. Like quitting is neutral. It's the feeling you attach to it that people get so caught up on.
Oh, that's brilliant right there. It really is. I love this concept of not attaching our identity to our emotions because it is really easy to do that. And then when we, like, for example, I identify as an optimist, right? I'm an optimist. But what about
I
the
see that
days?
in you.
It's kind of my nature. I feel like I came that way. But at the same time, what about the days when I don't feel optimistic? Am I a failure in those days if I have attached the whole of my identity to that? It's an aspect of who we are, but that emotion of just Pollyanna, I can do anything and it's fine, we'll figure it out, is a good attitude to have, but it can become a trap if we get caught in it and we believe that so much about who we are. And I think that in a post-COVID world, where a lot of young adults specifically hit their maturity during a time when they couldn't communicate with other people and they didn't have anybody else telling them or giving them feedback, they struggle to understand their identity and who they are in relation to other people. And I'm sure you see a lot of that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think that we all experience, the really unique thing about COVID and the lockdown, right, is that we all experience the same thing. And it's one of the very first times in history that, or I guess in recorded history, that almost everyone around the world experienced the exact same thing. And so I try to politely actually remind people that yes, young people were going through really transformational years during the pandemic, and that affected their neuropsychology, their brain development in different ways. However, research shows that most adults, their brain is still changing until you're about 28 years old. So for a lot of folks that were well beyond high school years, it also probably really screwed with your brain and the way that you think about connection and people and humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And I would even say those of us that were well beyond developmental years, it really challenged us. I think one of the things that I really struggled with coming out of the lockdown was trust, right? Like I already deal with a lot of trust issues. I didn't have the best childhood growing up. And that's something I really had to work through with therapy. But after the pandemic, I really struggled even more so with trust, with this like larger concept of like, who do you trust? Where do you trust information? And I mean, especially as an academic, like I spend a lot of my time researching and looking at other people's research and looking what does clean data look like compared to misinformation. And so that's something that really kind of messed with my brain. And so I always remind people that like, we're actually in a perfect world. We're all changing all the time. All the
Mm-hmm.
time. And so, yes, that experience might have affected some people more than others, but in a perfect world, it actually should have affected all of us. So, and I think that's why we've seen so many people post-pandemic that are like, I don't want to work a traditional 9 to 5 anymore, or I want to be a stay-at-home mom, or the opposite. Like I've been a stay-at-home mom and now I want to go back to the workforce, or, and I think whatever that is, like, that's wonderful. That's great. But
Yeah.
again, I think people are so terrified by this act of change and they can't separate their emotions from that feeling. And so I always tell people that I'm like, okay, well, let's redefine our relationship with change. So change is something that I feel like I was forced to live and really embrace when I was growing up. And I love to hear you say that you like really encourage your sons to like, if you've tried something diligently and you don't want to do it, great, quit. So my dad was the opposite. He like would throw me into everything under the sun. And then after like a week, I'd be like, I don't like this. And he'd be like, okay, great, let's try something new. So that did not teach me discipline. That taught me that like, I can literally change my mind at a dime and like nothing matters. And so
Oh,
that's
yeah.
something I had to really cope with as an adult, right? And so for me, my relationship with change, I had to really start to understand like change is good and healthy, but like, let's evaluate our change. Let's critically think about the change. Do I really want a new career, or do I just want a new job? Or do I really just want to make more money? Or is my passion cup a little low right now? That's actually where my podcast stemmed from, is that, I was feeling really not as passionate about the work I was doing. And I was feeling like my heart just wasn't centered anymore. And so I was like, well, I want to throw myself into something new. And so my husband was like, you know what, I can help you with this. Let's just do this. And like, I remember it was like 2 weeks, and I like started working on stuff, and all of a sudden he had a logo, and he had like Riverside and all this stuff. And he was like, we're ready to go, babe. And I was like, holy guacamole, what is happening? And I was like, I'm going to embrace this change. And ever since that moment, like, I felt like change and flexibility and adaptability are like such blessings in my life. And I'm so excited about the opportunity when someone's like, hey, I can no longer meet at 10. Can we meet at 7? And I'm like, yes, I can make this work. Abso-freaking-lutely. And I've really learned to love that feeling. And it makes me excited.
I think I'm an interesting person because I really like change. I always have.
You are
to the
interesting,
point
yes.
that and maybe it's an ADHD thing a little bit. Like as a kid, I would rearrange my room frequently. Like I had to have the furniture in different places. And even as an adult, I've actually realized that change can be addictive. I like it. I enjoy when something shifts and moves. And so we've moved a lot. We've changed houses a lot. We change where the garden is, change what we grow. And those things are great. But it reached a point like recently where I wanted to move. And we had to sit and evaluate, why do you want to move? I couldn't explain it. I'm like, I just feel this urge. I feel like we have to move. And we've been in this house 7 years, which is longer than I've ever lived anywhere, ever. So it was this time where we had to sit and evaluate, like, what are our non-negotiables and what are the things? And I thought I wanted certain things. And then we sat down and looked at it all on paper. And I'm like, actually, no, I think that we should just embrace where we are. And that was a beautiful acceptance, and me realizing that I was chasing change. It can be something as simple as needing to, cut your hair. Like, I have to I just need some change. And my hairdresser one day says, you realize tomorrow you're going to see the same face. It's just going to have shorter hair. Like, it's not going to change anything. It's not real change. It's quick. And I didn't.
I love that little micro moment you just said, that like you were kind of addicted to the change, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think some people are addicted to success. I think some people are addicted to change. I think opposite. Some people are totally addicted to stability and get so complacent, right? But this is a really unique thing, I think, specifically about most women. I shouldn't say all, but most women, is that, and it's the running joke, right? That like when a girl breaks up with a guy, she goes and gets her hair cut, or she, gets a new hair color or whatever it is. But we see this actually pretty frequently. Like, women are a little bit more flexible and adaptable than men, historically speaking. And so we do like kind of want that change and that transition. And it is so funny to me that most often women like that end up marrying someone that's usually polar opposite. My husband is a very like stable environment kind of guy. He's like, I want to live in Las Vegas forever, and I want to live in our same house. And I'm like, okay. Well, okay. But it's been a super fun part of our relationship, right? To identify like when I want change and he wants stability, like we can both be right at the same time, but identifying like, why are we feeling that way? And what is the root cause? That's something that I talk to my clients about a lot, is that like, what is your root cause of what you're feeling or what you're doing, and why? Because if that root is weak, if it's like a little baby bush and the root is just like, then, on a windy day, it's going to blow over, versus if your root is deep and entrenched and really like hyper focused around your values, then usually that root will stay and it's strong. So what's the why behind whatever you're doing?
I really love what you're talking about there with the communication between two people. And in any partnership or relationship, whether it's business or whether it's personal, marriage, whatever, if you're able to communicate your differences, because my husband and I are very different, very, very different. And we recognized that when we were dating. And he actually broke up with me because he said we were too different, right? And I was like, oh, au contraire. And I made him a whole list of all the things we had in common. But he was right. We are very different. And I got him back, clearly. We've been married 24 years.
Love that.
We were able to figure that out really early, that we are very different and we can communicate about it, especially when we are figuring ourselves out. We are understanding what is our identity. Having open communication with someone else There are things that my husband has taught me about myself through his observance that I'm like, oh, I did not even realize this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think communication is critical for everything in
Yeah.
life, but also like that openness and willingness that's one of the first questions I always ask someone when they come and talk to me. And whether it's a student or a client or anyone really, I ask them like, are you actually open to solutions? Are you open to change? Or are you just frustrated and want to vent? Because like, that's not what I'm here for.
Go
Like,
find a
it's really
therapist.
not. Yeah, truly,
Yeah.
truly. But I think that this is one of the biggest issues I've seen for especially a lot of younger folks. But again, I guess not really specific to them. That's just who I end up working with mostly, is that they don't really want to communicate. Like, there's a lot of fear for a lot of them, and shame and like hypersensitivity to vulnerability. And so when someone's trying to like tell them something, like I see this a lot with people with their first like quote unquote big kid job. And maybe their boss is like trying to communicate something that maybe is tougher. Maybe they're trying to give feedback or something, but they're giving it in a kind way. You know, they're like, hey, like you turned this in a little wrong. Like, how can I help you so that we can do this right next time? And instead of hearing those words, what they hear is like, you hate me. I suck. I should find a new job immediately. And then when they're retelling this story to me, I'm like, that is literally like not what happened at all.
Mm-hmm.
So like, let's focus on some communication standards here and communication breakdown. So one of the things I always teach people is just often just saying back whatever you hear, mirror the situation. So, okay, boss, I heard you say that I'm not doing very well at this and that I have a lot of room for growth and that I'm not really the employee you thought I was. Is that correct? And of course, most of the time, the boss will be like, that is not what I said at all. I said that you need to learn how to use Grammarly so that you can fix your documents before you send them in. And then once they have that clarifying moment, they're like, oh, that's easy. Like, I can do that. And they feel validated and they feel excited to make those changes. And so I think that communication is everyone's responsibility, 100%. But it is no one's responsibility to understand your triggers, your boundaries, your
Right.
drama. That is your problem. So you have to learn how to communicate that correctly with people, including leadership and professional development environments, so that they understand what you are hearing so they can better help you. So I think communication is honestly probably like the secret to success in every area of life. But I usually see that if someone sucks at it in one area, they suck at it in every area. If their
Yeah.
relationships are faltering and they're constantly dating new people or breaking up or have been divorced multiple times, usually their career is also a disaster. Usually they're getting fired a lot, or they're trying to find new jobs all the time, or all of their bosses suck. They're all horrible people. Like, none of them know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you have had 5 jobs in 5 years. There's no way all 5 of those people in 5 of those organizations are all awful. Like, you are the continuous moment here. You are the thing.
You are the common denominator.
Correct.
I think that a lot of problems arise when we place our validation or our need for validation in other people, right? Like, when we're expecting our boss to validate us and we aren't finding that within ourselves. If we're completely confident in who we are and we find our validation in ourselves, it's not going to matter what our boss says. It's not going to crumble that, you know? Early in my marriage, I assigned all of my validation to my husband because I had been in a career, I had been working, and suddenly I wasn't. There was no direct feedback anymore, and I had put all of my need for validation into other people. And you get it. In a job, you do get, you did a good job today. Oh, thank you for this. Oh, you know, you can look at the end of the day and see everything you accomplished. And it's not necessarily the same when you're a stay-at-home mom, I'll just say that. And so I had to learn to find validation in myself and not to expect it from him. Because he'd come home from work and I would be like, I did blah, 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 blah today. And I would wait for him to be like, wow, you're so amazing. Wow, you're so awesome. And if he didn't, I'd be mad at him. He's horrible. Why is he not validating me? Of course, I didn't use that term. What advice do you have to help people figure out how to find validation in themselves? And how does that tie to their definition of success?
That's such a great question. So I always tell people, right, like I think I'm unique in this way, and I think it's kind of a hot take. People don't always love what I'm about to say, but I really don't believe in the idea of work-life balance. I don't really believe in compartmentalization. I believe we are one human and we're going to show up as that one self in every area of our life, good, bad, and ugly. So I think that when people are really challenged or struggling with the idea of like who they are and really seeking out validation, that again, I just kind of remind people, I'm like, well, let's go back to the start. Like, where is this stemming from? I believe pretty much everyone under the sun needs therapy, probably for, little T or big T, like everyone has experienced something. So even if you don't want to go a traditional therapy route, even just the understanding that maybe things didn't work out as perfectly as you expected. I really feel for parents because this is one of the reasons my husband and I chose not to be parents is like, there is so much pressure on to raise these precious little humans that are going to be the next generation of adults. And pretty much no matter what you do, you're going to have a season of that kid's life where they hate you. And that just sounds awful to me. Like, kudos to parents. You all are resilient and just honestly, you are building the future that I am unwilling to do. So thank you for that. But I say that because I think that a lot of times, I do see this a lot with women. I'm sure it happens with men as well. But I think they really seek out that idea of validation from things that truly cannot validate them. So if it is their kiddos, like your kiddos don't even know that language. They don't even know. And it is not their place to validate you. I see this struggle a lot with moms and I don't know what it is to be a mom, so I can't speak to that. But I do see this a lot is that they're, hoping their kids are going to be the first one to run or the first one to stand or the first one to speak in class. And that's somehow going to make them a better mom, which is going to make them a better person, which is going to make them more valuable to society. And I'm like, well, that is some horse crap. Like,
Yeah.
that is such a horrible way to look at life. So I always start with like, okay, so for people that have a faith, I think this is easier than others. I'll just be transparent about that if you're rooted in a bigger picture, whether that's God or the universe, or I don't even care, the wind, like whatever it is, it's a little bit easier to say like, I am working towards that thing. And that's what I care most about. I think if you do not have that sense of higher power, that's totally okay, but you do have to figure out what grounds you. So for me, one of the things that has helped me the most personally, and I find helps a lot of my clients, is developing a personal mission statement. So if you're in a committed partnership, I encourage people to do this together because in theory, you should be one unit, not two units. I think that's sometimes when partnerships get really wonky is when two people are on totally different tracks.
Yeah.
So if you're in a partnership, doing it together. But so our mission statement says that our purpose in life is to help people break the chains of mediocrity and help them to go out of the box that society puts them in. And so I think that looks a lot of different ways, right? So like my husband works in sports broadcasting. He specifically works in sports betting. And so for a lot of people, they believe that whether this is right or wrong is not my opinion to judge, but like they believe that because my husband has a faith and he works in sports betting, that he is like the devil. And I'm like, well, maybe that was true at some point, but I don't think that's true, right? And so he always reminds people that when they like come into our house and there's crosses on the walls, or when they see us at church, he's like, well, yeah, like I work in sports betting and I love God and I can do both at the same time. Two things can be true. And so that, I think that's the way he helps people to like break out of those boxes of societal expectation, right? Mine is obviously a little bit more clear, right? Like I work with people in career and professional development and helping them really think about their plans and their strategies. So that's easier for me. But every day when I'm having a hard day or a bad moment or I'm frustrated or angry or whatever those feelings are, I look, and we have our mission statement actually printed in our house, like on a big old wall. And I look at that and I say like, am I living my life in alignment with this thing that I claim is the most important thing for me? And if the answer is yes, then it doesn't matter. Like it might be a hard day. It might be a hard moment. I might be feeling some sort of way, but like I am on the right track and I have to stay committed to that track. And that's what I tell people to do is write it out, put it somewhere you're going to see it often. And then when you're having those crappy moments, look at it and ask yourself that question. Am I still committed to this? And am I on the right track? And if you are, amazing. Keep walking the track. Believe that it's going to work.
I love this idea, though, of writing it out, because a lot of times people are like, well, I know who I am. I know my purpose. And it's like, but until you put it to words, like when you have to take this idea in your head and come up with vocabulary that expresses it, it is powerful. Jenna had so many amazing things to share that I decided to break this up into 2 separate episodes. The second episode is going to focus more on Jenna's history and how she overcame some really challenging childhood experiences to grow into the beautiful, confident, and helpful woman that she is today. So stay tuned for that second episode. And in the meantime, if you would be willing to give me a like or a share, I would really appreciate it. And go connect with me on social media. I love making new friends. Thank you so much for listening today to The Story of Her.